Okay, so we're talking about these exceptional structures in mathematics and physics, structures like E8, things like these ADE graphs, these very, very special structures that sort of lie in the middle of mathematics and seem highly related to theoretical physics. And recently, Norman Wildberger has done some work which shows a very, very lovely, simple way to look at these structures in terms of something called mutation games. So I think this is really incredible because it gives some amazing shortcut to allow anybody to understand what these immense structures are. And these are perhaps the structures that underlie the laws of physics, for example. So it's very, very cool that there are these methods that can allow anyone to think about these sort of structures. Now, whether this E8 structure itself is the thing that determines the laws of the universe is still very much in debate, but there are other structures where we can play these kind of mutation games. For example, the graph that just has two distinct linked vertices. And when we do that, we get this structure which very much mirrors what we see in particle physics. So this eightfold way of Gell Mann, this way of understanding the structure of the quarks and their interactions, basically falls straight out of this sort of framework. So it's very, very important stuff. It's also very, very easy to think about. So what we have is a simple undirected graph. So just a load of vertices, some of which are linked by these edges. And we're going to suppose that this gives a connected structure and that we only have links that go between distinct vertices. And now all we do once we have a graph like this is we play what Wildberger calls the mutation game. Now I'm going to copy his great description of this, which is basically that we think of these vertices as different cities on Mars, and we think about the different populations of Martians at these cities, and those can be integers. So the idea is that we have Martians, but there's also such a thing as anti-Martians. And when a Martian and an anti-Martian live in the same city, they cancel each other out. So essentially, the populations of these cities on Mars are integers, not like the natural numbered populations that we have here on Earth. The other thing about Martians is that sometimes they can clone themselves. So now I've told you about what a population is. So a population, sometimes a population vector, is just where we associate every vertex of our graph with some integer population. And then the way that we update the system is we do, let's say, a mutation at a certain vertex. So that can be any vertex we pick. Let's say it's this one here. And what we then do is we make the population at that vertex negative. So you imagine every Martian turning into an anti-Martian, every anti-Martian turning into a Martian. Now that's obviously quite trivial in this Martianless city in this example. But then the other thing we do is we add the populations of all of the neighbors to that population. So this ends up becoming 1 minus 0. So after we update at this bottom left vertex, this is the new population vector. So in general then, one of these mutation updates is where we pick a particular vertex of our graph to update at. We turn its population negative, and that's like this flip event where all the Martians become anti-Martians, or anti-Martians Martians. The populace of the neighboring cities sort of get alarmed by this, and they clone their own populations and send a copy of these clones along these sort of roads between these cities, and they flow into this. And so the net effect of this, which is really all we care about here, is that the populations of all the cities other than the updated one don't change. And the way that the population of the updated city changes is first we make it negative, and then we add the populations of all of the adjacent vertices added together to represent this sort of cloning and migrating response to the sign flipping. So that's what happens when we do a mutation. And so we're pretty much there now. Let's just see what happens when we have this graph and we do a few mutations. So maybe we mutate at this vertex next. So first we change the sign, so we get minus 0, and then we add 2. So that becomes a 2. And now what we could do, for example, is update at this vertex. So it becomes minus 1, and then we add the scores of the adjacent. So plus 1, plus 2. Which is going to be 2. So this is the basic game we play. And you can see that you have choices of which vertex you want to update at different points. And it's a little bit like Sudoku. You have your sort of game state and you can change it by making different moves. And the game state in this case is this population. And so to understand all these beautiful structures in mathematics, we're going to play this mutation game, but we're particularly interested in playing it when our graph structure is a special kind of graph structure. So I'm going to show you three families of special graphs now. And the first one, these kind of graphs are called AM. So this is A3, this is A4, this is A5. So AM is a graph like this, where the total number of vertices is equal to n. Now, the dn graph is very similar. It has n vertices, but it has a sort of fishtail at the end. So this one here would be, so this would be d6, for example. So we're interested in what happens when we play these games for these graphs an, where n is some natural number. Similarly, we're interested in playing them for these graphs dn, and we're also interested in what happens in these three special graphs here, which you can just see. This is E6, E7, and E8. Particularly E8, because the way that this works on E8 might describe all the laws of the universe, so it's kind of a good reason to study it. But okay, so far we know about the idea of like populations, which are where we put. So okay, let's step back. We have some graph. It could be one of these ones. And the primary thing we're interested in is basically how the mutation game works. So if we want to take a sort of God's eyes view of this, we could say, okay, we're interested in all the different population vectors that we could have on our graph, all the ways to allocate integers to the vertices, and all the ways that these things could evolve when we do different mutations at different vertices, and they're going to change these population vectors. But there's more specific kinds of information that are particularly interesting if we want to study this sort of ADE phenomenon and these exceptional structures on graphs. And that's particularly what happens. So if we have a graph G, then we can define what we call roots of G, or the roots of G. And what this is it's the set of population vectors that are reachable from unit vectors. So what do I mean by reachable and what do I mean by unit vectors? Well, unit vectors are easy. Unit vector is just one of these population vectors, let's say on E8, or it could be on any graph, where we have a population of 1 on one of the vertices and a population of 0 on all the others. So in this Mars analogy, it would be like a situation on Mars where there's one guy living in one city, one Martian living in one city, and all the other cities are empty. So that would be a unit vector. And there's obviously, if our graph has n vertices, there's going to be these n different unit vectors. Actually, we have a vector space of populations. So that's what it means to have a unit vector. Now, what's it mean for one population vector to be reachable from another one? So what's it mean if population vector Q is sort of reachable from P? Well, as I'm sort of trying to illustrate here, what it basically means is that with the right kind of choice of mutation updating at the proper vertices, we can warp this population vector P here to become this population vector Q. So let's have a look at an example. So we might pick our graph to be this one here, which is called A2. And then we might have this as our starting population vector. And then we can see that if we update this, so let's call these the first vertex and the second vertex. Well, we can see that if we update the second vertex, then we're going to end up with a population like this. And now if we update the first vertex, what's going to happen? Well, the 1's going to become a -1, and when we add the other one on, so that becomes a 0, right? Because it starts as a 1, then the sign flip, and then we add the score of a neighbor. So this becomes a 0. So we could say that we start with this, and then we do mutation at 2, then we get to this population vector here. And then if we do this mutation at 1, we get to this population vector here. So clearly, this population vector here is reachable from this population vector here, because we can do some sequence of mutations to get to the latter from the former. And so what I'm saying is that we're particularly interested here in this set called roots of G. And this consists of all of the population vectors that can be reached starting from any unit vector. And this is extraordinarily important. And basically, this structure, root E8, is this kind of cosmically important structure which might have all the laws of the universe in it. So what I'm saying is that if we start with this E8 graph, and we start with the different unit vectors, and we see where we can get from there using our dot product stuff, using our updating, then that whole structure that we can sort of arrive at seems like a very important structure in mathematics and physics. So we're going to have a look at exactly how we can code this and what these structures are momentarily. But just before we do that, I just want to say one more thing. You know, if you're doing ordinary geometry, like say planar geometry, then you might have a couple of points. So this one, let's say it has coordinates 3, 2, and this one has coordinates 1, 5. And then you can take the dot product of these things. Now, okay, I'm going to write this in a weird way now, but let's say we have a sort of unit vector pointing this way called E1, and a unit vector here pointing this way called E2. And then we want to work out what this dot product is. So I'm trying to explain basically what this idea of dot product is for people that might not know. And also we're going to sort of generalize this. So even if you know about ordinary dot products, you might want to look at this. So we can write this vector 1, 5 as 1 times this unit vector that's going to the right, plus 5 times this unit vector that's going up. And we want to times this by this thing here, which is 3 times E1 plus 2 times E2. And now if we expand out all these brackets, just like in ordinary algebra, we end up getting that it's going to be 1 times 3 times E1 dot E1 plus 1 times 2 times E1 dot E2 plus 5 times 3 times E2 dot E1 plus 5 times 2 times E2 dot E2. Now, the normal way we do dot product then is going to be that E1 dot E1 equals E2 dot E2 equals 1. And these ones where we're dotting two unit vectors that are different, well, they're perpendicular, so that'll be a 0. So they're the normal rules by which we compute dot products in our ordinary geometry. But I want to say, for understanding the geometry of this stuff, because so here we're making vectors, we're playing with these population vectors. If we have a graph with n vertices, then these are vectors in n-dimensional space, because a population is described by these n numbers. And it turns out that there's a special kind of dot product that we can define on such an n-dimensional space. So we can write our population as sums of these unit vector populations, and then we define this interesting sort of dot product, so that in our case, if we have, so that in our case on this graph, we define it so that if we have a unit vector, say for the ith vertex, dotted with itself, we say that gives an answer of 2. And if I and j are adjacent on the graph, if they're linked, then their dot product is -1. And if I and j are distinct and not linked, then their dot product is 0. So this defines an alternative sort of dot product on our space of populations. And it turns out that that kind of way of looking at everything basically makes everything work. We're going to see this shortly. So what I want to do now is to show you some mathematica code that I've written to compute this stuff. So this is the basic code that sort of does everything, makes all these graphs and so on, and defines all those update rules. And so what we're seeing here is that when we get this A3 graph and we basically calculate the roots of it, so we look at so these different nodes here, these are the different population vectors. And you see where we start with these sort of unit population vectors, we have these edges which are showing where we can get by doing updates of those things. And you see in this case, we can reach these 12 different vertices. Now, it turns out that these correspond to the 12 vertices of the cuboctahedron. So there's a way that we can get this sort of root lattice, which is basically showing these different directions in this kind of crystalline structure in n-dimensional space. Well, there's ways we can get these vectors, and then we can form this sort of polytope out of it. In this case, this is a cuboctahedron. So here's a picture of it. So the way that we get this in general is we look at all of these vertices that we can reach. Now, if we're playing this mutation game and we're just starting at these unit vectors and we're evolving according to the mutation game, and our graph is one of these ADE graphs, then in that case, all of the populations that we get, this set of roots of G, is going to be finite, and it's going to correspond to the vertex set of a polyhedron when we basically just think of these different root population vectors as vertices, and we link two of them precisely when the dot product between them is -1 under the dot product I just spoke about. So in that case, here we get the cuboctahedron, but we can do all this stuff much more generally. So we can also play this. So this is what happens when we play the game with A2. So this corresponds to this Gell Mann eightfold way thing. I'll put a link in the video to one of Wildberger's videos where he explains all this in much more detail. But one can play similar games with these D graphs, the ones with the sort of fishtail at the end, and also with these E graphs. So you can see that the root structures that we get have 72 points for E6, 126 for E7, and 240 for E8. And then in each case, you can compute these polytopes. So this is all done in this code, but I haven't really spent much time sort of unpacking this yet, although I'm going to. But it's very interesting. One can also study the Vail groups associated with these things, and the Vail groups basically, if you think about like a generic population vector on your graph, so you say it has like n vertices, you could just write x1, x2, dot, 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 xn, and those would be like general integers. And then you can see how generally those would change when you do different mutations at different vertices. And basically, if you look at the operations in that way, you're essentially looking at them as linear maps in this n-dimensional population space. Well, they're like n by n matrices, and they form a group, and this is the Vail group on the matrix multiplication. So there's a connection with representation theory here as well.